Today on Alex Nautos, we're out here in the forest taking a look at the 2015 Toyota Camry. This is actually a mid-cycle refresh, not an entirely new vehicle, although it does look very different from the 2014 model. The mid-size sedan segment is incredibly crowded and incredibly competitive. When you factor in equipment levels in competing vehicles, they almost always end up within a few $100s of one another. So this is a very, very competitive segment, and that's exactly why Toyota has gone back and redesigned the inside and the outside of the Camry for the 2015 model year to help keep it fresh and help keep it competitive with a lot of those new mid-size sedans that are coming out. The model we're taking a look at today is the hybrid SE model. However, I will be talking about all the various Camry models. 2015 brings two different front-end looks to the Camry. The model we're taking a look at right here is the SE model, and it has the same front end as the XSE model. The LE and the XLE have an entirely different front end. It has more horizontal lines right here and none of this egg crate that we're getting down here lower in the front bumper. If you do get the V6 engine, then we have LED headlamps. It's LED high beams and LED low beams. That's something we started to see on the Toyota Corolla in its recent generation. Somewhat unusually, the hybrid Camry, regardless of trim level, does not get LED headlamps. At 189.2 inches long, the Camry is not one of the larger entries in this segment. In fact, the Honda Accord is a few inches larger than this. That doesn't affect interior room too much on the Camry, however, because the Camry's legroom numbers, front and rear, are very competitive in this segment. That's really the main thing that you get out of the longer entries in this segment is increased footroom, but that really doesn't seem to hold the Camry back. You will find more room on the inside, however, than something like the brand new redesigned Subaru Legacy, which is one of the smallest entries in this mid-size sedan segment. Out back, we also get a refresh for 2015 with slightly different styling in the back. Since we are in the SE model, we do have the spoiler tacked right on top of the trunk lid. We have a single exhaust tip on our hybrid model. In terms of overall style, I still prefer models like the Ford Fusion, the Mazda 6, as well as the Honda Accord to the Toyota Camry's exterior look. It's not offensive by any stretch of the imagination, but Toyota hasn't really thought as far outside the box as some of those other auto manufacturers. That's really not the Camry's style in general, however. The Camry is definitely elegant. It's also restrained in its exterior styling, very much like that Honda Accord or the Nissan Altima. Part of that restrained styling is right back here in the rear passenger area of the Camry, and that's very, very important as we go around the Camry and take a look, especially in the rear passenger comfort score, because this upright profile that we have in the Camry is part of what makes this a little bit less sexy than the Ford Fusion or some of those other entries, but an awful lot more practical because we have more headroom back here, very much like that Honda Accord. Under the hood is the one area where not a whole lot has changed for 2015. We start out with the same 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine as we did before, produces 178 horsepower and 170 pound-feet of torque. We then get a 3.5-liter optional V6 engine, produces 268 horsepower and 248 pound-feet of torque. Both of those engines are mated to a standard 6-speed automatic transmission, and they send power right here to the front wheels. As before, there is an optional hybrid system, which is the model we're taking a look at right here. It starts out with a 2.5-liter Atkinson cycle four-cylinder engine. That engine produces 156 horsepower and 156 pound-feet of torque. But it is mated to a series of electric motors and generators. There are two of them in this vehicle, and those raise this output to 200 horsepower combined with the nickel metal hydride battery pack that's back in the trunk. Fuel economy starts out at 25 miles per gallon city, 35 highway, 28 combined for the 2.5-liter four-cylinder model. Fuel economy on the hybrid model depends on which trim level you get because the tire size does vary, and that does cause a drop in the hybrid fuel economy. The base model starts at 43 miles per gallon city, 39 highway, 41 combined, and if you get the top-end hybrid trim, it'll drop to 40 miles per gallon city, 38 highway, and 40 combined. Front seat comfort comes in at 9 out of 10 points. This is one of the more comfortable entries in this segment, even in base form. That's because all models of Camry get a standard 8-way power driver's seat. Our particular model has the up-level 10-way power driver's seat with a power lumbar support, and the lumbar support does get fairly aggressive in the seat, which is something that I really like. I do rate the Honda Accord as well as the Nissan Altima slightly higher than the Camry, but this is higher than most of the entries in this segment. These seats are definitely more comfortable than the Ford Fusion, especially if you're on longer car trips. The driver also gets a manually adjustable tilt telescopic steering column with a decent range of motion. One thing to keep in mind is that in general, the power passenger seat or manual passenger seat doesn't have the same range of motion as the driver, depending on which trim you get. When it comes to rear seat comfort, I'll also give this 9 out of 10 points. These seats are very comfortable. The seat bottom cushion is a little bit higher off the floor than some of the other entries, making it more comfortable for adults or larger children. The seat back is not terribly reclined. We sit in a more upright position, which is more comfortable long term, and we also have a decent amount of headroom in the Camry. I do have about 1.5 inches of headroom, even though we're in the model with the sunroof. One important thing to keep in mind with the Camry is this pillar right back here. And if I sit back and lean my headrest against the fixed headrest in our SE model, sitting upright very comfortably in this seat, I can't really see out, and I can't see you, you can't see me, because this pillar is right here. Scooting over to the middle seat, headroom is still very good. My hair is barely brushing the ceiling, but I can sit upright in this middle seat. It is a decent amount higher and further forward than these outboard bucket-shaped seats. Unlike some of the other entries in this segment, we only have a very small hump right here in the middle. That means you do have a little bit more legroom for that middle passenger. Scooting all the way over to the right side of the Camry, I still have about 2.5 inches of legroom behind this front seat. It's all the way back in its tracks because I had a 6'5" passenger sitting up front. Rear passengers get a softly padded center armrest with dual fixed cup holders right there. And if we tilt down this 60/40 folding seat back, you can see that we have a very small trunk pass-through because the hybrid battery does go across the rear trunk. Let's start out our spin around the interior right here in the back. As you can see, we do have fixed headrests for both the center and the outboard positions right here on the rear seats. That does make it a little bit trickier to install top tether anchors for child seats. If you want to know more about how well child seats fit inside the Camry, then go ahead and click that banner at the bottom of your screen. There's a detailed review on that. The driver and the front passenger get these two-way adjustable headrests, and we also have height adjustable seatbelts for both the driver and the front passenger. Since we are in the hybrid SE model, we have these fabric seats, as you can see, but they are trimmed with a Softex imitation leather trim right there on the bolster for both the side of the seat back as well as the seat bottom cushion right down there. Front door panels have changed a little bit for 2015. We have a little bit more soft touch plastic going on right here as well. We have a sort of a rubbery armrest. This is not quite as soft as you'll find in some of the competition. Then you'll find harder plastics below that. Towards the bottom of both the front doors, you will find a speaker as well as a bottle holder and a small storage compartment right there below the window switches. Across the dashboard, we have a soft touch injection molded upper dashboard and hard plastics lower in the dashboard. If we open up this glove box, it is sort of a slot variety glove box that was easily able to accommodate a tablet computer inside. Taking a closer look at the dashboard, we have this sort of two-level motif right here. This is all one injection molded piece, imitation aluminum trim running right across it. And if we zoom in on this, you'll notice that this is actually real stitching on the injection molded dashboard. So what they did here was they just injection molded the dashboard and then they ran a sewing machine right along it to give you this trim right here. This is not injection molded into it. This actually is thread that is then sewn and stitched right into that plastic. Moving over to the center of the dashboard, we have a different design that is more attractive than the outgoing model. We have hard plastics right up here for this portion, surrounded again by that soft touch injection molded dashboard. You may find more hard touch plastics on the inside of the Camry than some of the competition. In general, hard plastics are a little bit less expensive to manufacture, and that has allowed Toyota to give us more standard equipment than you'll find on most of the competition, including a touchscreen radio with a backup camera in all Camry models. Right now we're taking a look at the up-level trim, which does have the navigation system integrated with this. If you want to know more about Toyota's touchscreen Entune infotainment system, go ahead and click that banner at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to a video dedicated to just this Entune system. Key things you need to know is that this system does have complete voice commands for your USB or your iPod device library. Right now I have my iPhone connected to it, as you can see right there. When you have a USB or an Apple iOS device connected to the system, you can click that voice command button on the steering wheel and issue very natural voice commands to the system to play specific artists, albums, genres, etc. You'll find navigation as well as the eco screen over here on the apps button. That's where we have traffic, weather, and a few other features. Home button takes us back to the home screen. Very large seek up and down buttons right over here. Below that infotainment system, we have a dual zone climate control in our SE model. Below the dual zone climate control, we have a storage cubby. If we open it up, we have a 12-volt power outlet, auxiliary input, and USB input for that Entune system, as well as a Qi wireless charging mat. That's the enable disable button for that system. You can put a Qi enabled phone right there and it will charge. Of course, my iPhone 5 is not Qi enabled, so it doesn't really do anything for me. The storage cubby is large enough to hold phones or small tablets. You can actually put a very small tablet in there and still close that door. There's also a slight cutout right here so that way you can close this door and still have the cable escape without getting chomped on. Moving behind that, we have a very traditional shifter. We have drive right down here, and then we move over to B in our hybrid model, which is engine braking mode. Two very large cup holders right here, easily able to accommodate these large takeout sodas. Behind the cup holders, we have our EV mode button and eco mode button in our hybrid. We also have an additional storage slot right there, easily sized for our iPhone 5. Moving down the center console, we have the center armrest. This is not as thickly padded as you'll find in some of the competition. If we open it up, we find a very large storage compartment. Have a lot of stuff jammed right there inside. This is a fairly large and fairly deep compartment. Like some of the competition, this armrest slides forward and backward to help adjust to different driver heights. Again, keeping in mind that we are in the hybrid model, we have this 4-dial arrangement. Instead of a tachometer, we have a power meter. Charge is right down here on this side. The more power you consume, it'll go all the way over to that side. It sort of gives you an impression of how much total vehicle power you're using from 0 to 100 and how much charging you're doing when you step on the brake pedal. Below that we have our engine temperature, and then over on the right we have our speedometer and fuel gauge. Between the power gauge and the tachometer we have a new multi-information display. It's controlled via this 5-button arrangement right here on the steering wheel. Back, up, down, select, and change page. The multi-information display gives you your usual trip computer information like average fuel economy, trip distance, energy monitor, tire pressure, etc. We also have navigation information. We would have turn-by-turn directions displayed right here if navigation was active. This of course only applies to vehicles with navigation. We have infotainment right here. It would give you some limited information on what's going on your media device. Vehicle messages, and of course we have settings for particular vehicle settings that pertain strictly to the vehicle. Certain vehicle settings are controlled via that Entune system, but most of those relate to your infotainment. Previous versions of the Toyota Camry have been criticized for their number of button blanks in the dashboard that serve to remind you that you didn't get all the options in your car. Well, that's been minimized for the 2015 Camry. We still have a few of those over on the left side of the driver. Despite not being the largest entry in the segment, the Camry's trunk is very generous. It also is very handily shaped. I might have just invented a new word there. Let me know in the comment section down below. What I mean is this 24-inch roller bag right here can actually fit in this upright position, very much like some of Nissan's products. This is a trick that Nissan's been doing lately to help improve cargo practicality. You can actually close the trunk lid like that. Now you can't put this bag in this position and close the trunk lid, even though it will actually fit in the trunk. The lid won't actually close with the bag in that position, and you of course can't do that with a 26-inch roller bag. But the reason that's more practical is because you could line up 24-inch roller bags like that right across the back of this cargo area, stick additional luggage right here, and then you can actually stack these 26-inch roller bags like this behind this, at least too high in the trunk. One thing to note is that these hinges do impact your cargo carrying capacity, so if we put larger and bulkier items right over here on the side, they can end up interfering with these trunk hinges. If we lift up the cargo load floor, we will find a styrofoam divider right here with our jack and our tire iron, and we have a donut spare tire under there. It does appear that there is enough room in this well to accommodate a full-size spare tire if you'd like to put that and purchase it aftermarket. The hybrid model that we're looking at has a little bit less cargo room than the regular model, but the difference is not as big as you might think. The biggest difference between this and the gasoline-only model is actually the loss of the cargo pass-through. Instead of the traditional trunk pass-through, the Camry gets away with just this trunk pass-through slot right over here. It's positioned on the 60 side of the traditional 60/40 folding backrest. So we have this one backrest knob right here instead of two knobs because this 40 portion of the seat does not fold down at all. That means that you can stick certain longer items right here through this little passport, but it's not as handy as many of those other hybrids in this market. When it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index, the Camry scores 8 out of 10 points in this hybrid model, and you get an extra half point in the gasoline version because we do retain that split 60/40 folding seat back and the larger trunk pass-through. We gain a few points for having a very large and accommodating trunk, as well as room for a full-size spare tire under this load floor if you do buy one yourself aftermarket. We lose points, however, for these hinges that do impact the cargo area, and the fact that we don't have a handle on the inside or on the outside of the trunk lid to help you close that trunk lid. That leaves you to paw and possibly get your hands dirty or scratch the paint on the outside, or possibly pull on the trim or this emergency release handle on the inside. Like the Ford and the Honda hybrid systems, city traffic and stop-and-go traffic like this is really where the hybrid system excels in terms of fuel economy. And that's because the engine doesn't need to run all the time. In fact, it's actually running less than half of the time in my testing in most city driving. That really gives you a very good fuel economy figure for city driving. That's all made possible because the air conditioning and HVAC system in this vehicle is battery powered or electric powered, however you want to take a look at it, and that means the engine doesn't need to be running in order for the air conditioning to be running. Without the engine idling when you're stopped at stoplights like this, it's very easy to get over 45 miles per gallon in city driving, just like it is in the Ford Fusion Hybrid or the Honda Accord Hybrid. When it comes to acceleration, I'll give the Camry 8 out of 10 points. It really depends on which version of the Camry you're taking a look at. The V6 is very similar to most of the V6 entries in this segment. However, the Nissan Altima, thanks to its CVT and the stout V6 engine, is faster 0 to 60. The V6 model came in around 6.5 seconds, 0 to 60. The 4-cylinder model comes in around 8.5 seconds. It's a decent improvement for that V6 model, and the hybrid model comes in right in the middle at 7 seconds, 0 to 60. With that 7-second 0 to 60 time, you can see that the justification for buying the hybrid is not just fuel economy, it's actually performance and fuel economy both. When you compare the acceleration on the base 4-cylinder Camry to the CVT-equipped competition like the Honda, as well as the Nissan and the Subaru, those are going to be a little bit faster 0 to 60 because CVTs are more efficient and really help improve acceleration, especially with small engines. Although many of the 2-liter turbo competitors do seem to have more advantageous torque figures, they aren't necessarily faster 0 to 60 than the V6 in the Camry. They all come in right around the same time. The only exception, as I said earlier, is that V6 with the CVT in the Nissan Altima. It does scoot to 60 fairly quickly. One of the major changes for 2015 was the suspension tuning in the Camry. Now, the Camry has long been a soft entry in terms of suspension tuning in this segment, and while that's true for the 2015 model year, it definitely has become more firm and more engaging. They've also altered the steering feel in the car to give it a little bit more weight and a little bit more precision as well. Now, the combination of those things are still not going to make this the equal of the Mazda 6 or the Ford Fusion, but it does mean that the Camry is no longer last in this segment when it comes to handling or road feel out on the road. Now it's right in the middle of the pack. Handling varies greatly depending on the trim level of the Camry you get, because tire size varies greatly. Things start out with 205 with tires in base models. Base models of the hybrid also get fairly narrow tires. If you get the upper level trims, we get 225 with tires. Of course, the wider the tire, the lower your fuel economy will be, and that's why there's that difference in fuel economy between the bottom and the top end on the hybrid trim. Overall, when it comes to handling, I'll give this 7 out of 10 points, but I'll give the ride 10 out of 10 points because the ride really is one of the best rides in this segment. It's very well composed, it's not overly soft, and it feels very well controlled out on the road. When it comes to fuel economy, I'll give this hybrid model 9 out of 10 points. This did score 1 notch below the Honda Accord hybrid and 1 notch above the Ford Fusion hybrid. The V6 version of the Camry is very comparable to most of the V6 entries by the competition, so I'll give that 9 out of 10 points. 10 out of 10 points for the V6 fuel economy really goes to the Nissan Altima because it was about 27 miles per gallon, almost what we're getting really out of this hybrid with the V6 engine and the CVT. CVTs are becoming an awful lot more common in this segment, and as a result, the 4-cylinder fuel economy in the Camry, and that would be the base engine, gets 7 out of 10 points when it comes to fuel economy. It was lower than the Honda Accord, lower than the Nissan Altima in my tests, but just about the same as the Ford Fusion or most of the other competition that still uses a traditional automatic. Although it's hard to tell on this rainy freeway, I give cabin noise 8 out of 10 points. We scored 70 decibels at 50 miles an hour in the Camry, which makes us one of the quieter entries in this segment. Overall, the Camry is a very well-rounded entry out on the road. The suspension feels very sorted in this vehicle, never feels lost or ponderous out on the road. This is certainly one of the softer models in terms of overall ride out on the road, but the handling doesn't suffer as much as you might think. The Camry is certainly not sloppy like some people have accused the Camry of being in the past, but it doesn't handle with the same crispness that you get out of the Ford Fusion or the Mazda 6. The Camry is an excellent highway cruiser, which is why we're driving this out on Interstate 280 here in Northern California, because this really is where the Camry excels. We get excellent fuel economy, especially in this hybrid model. The suspension is very well tuned for this sort of driving, but if your highway turns into a rural highway or a mountain highway that's very curvy, you're not going to become unsettled in the Camry. It's still going to feel very confident. When it comes to braking, I'll give this 7 out of 10 points. Braking distances in the regular 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder models were about the same as most of the competition, but braking fade resistance wasn't quite as good. When we're talking about this hybrid model that we're driving right here, the one thing you'll notice is that the transitions between regenerative braking and friction braking are not as smooth as you'll find in the Honda or the Ford hybrids. I'm not quite sure why that is, but the most noticeable difference is if you're braking moderately in this vehicle and then someone in front of you starts to stop very suddenly and you have to transition from moderate braking to more severe braking, it feels a little bit disconcerting in this hybrid. It's not that it doesn't stop, but all of a sudden you get the same braking, and then much harsher braking as you start to slow down. That's not going to happen in the Honda or the Ford hybrids to the same extent, but in general, all hybrids have a little bit of that same behavior. Pricing for 2015 starts at $22,970 for the base LE model. That is very similar to every other starting price in this midsize sedan segment. There are very few models that start less than this, but they generally have less equipment than the Toyota Camry as well. If a hybrid is more your style, the hybrid LE model starts at $26,790, which makes the Camry one of the least expensive hybrids in the midsize sedan category. If you want the hybrid SE model, exactly like we're taking a look at right here, $27,995. If you want the top-end hybrid XLE, that'll set you back $29,980. Because we are talking about hybrids in this video, this particular hybrid model got me 36 miles per gallon, which is a little bit lower than its EPA score. However, that still means you'll save about $500 versus the base 2.4-liter engine in the regular old Camry SE model. This is also a little bit faster 0 to 60, which means your payback will be about 8 years. Of course, it really depends on how much you value that fuel economy, whether you buy or lease the car, and whether or not you value the added performance in the hybrid. Depending on your percentage of city to highway driving, your payback figures may vary. The more city driving you do, the shorter the payback window will be on the hybrid because we get much better fuel economy in stop-and-go traffic than you do in that regular engine. Honda's Accord starts at $22,105, which is only a little bit off the base price of this vehicle. When you've similarly configured your Accord versus your Camry, you're going to end up within about $100 of each other, so it really depends on which one speaks to you more. The Accord styling is a little bit more restrained. We don't get quite as nice of a ride in the Accord. However, the handling is definitely better in the Accord. It really has a much more sorted feel out on the road. Now, the Accord Hybrid versus the Camry Hybrid is a very different kind of comparison because the Accord Hybrid is actually a decent amount more expensive than the Camry Hybrid. It comes in about $2,000 to $2,500 more expensive depending on how you configure your Camry and how you configure your Accord. The hybrid system in the Accord will actually give you about 50 miles per gallon as long as you drive your Accord very gently. I wasn't able to get that kind of fuel economy in the Toyota Camry. However, when it comes to payback, it will take you a decent amount of time to recover that amount if you buy the Accord versus this Camry. Ford's Fusion starts at $22,010. The big thing to know about that Ford Fusion is it has a very sexy side profile which severely limits rear passenger room. So if you're really after a family sedan that you can fit especially teenagers, tall teenagers mind you, in the back seats, the Ford Fusion may not be the best vehicle for you because you'll have an awful lot more headroom in the Camry than you will in that Fusion. That also goes for the very closely related Lincoln MKZ. Like many of Ford's latest products, the Fusion is going for a slightly different angle than the Camry. The Camry is trying to be the best product at the mid to low end of its price range, whereas the Fusion really excels at the top end of its price range. So the Ford Fusion you can get with things like turbocharged engines, all-wheel drive systems, radar cruise control, self-parking systems, etc. Luxury options aside, the Ford Fusion gets slightly better fuel economy than this. We also have better performance out of its engines and better handling than the Camry. Yet again, very much like the Accord, the ride in the Camry is better, but the handling isn't quite as good. Nissan's Altima starts at $22,300, and it has been one of my favorite entries in this segment. One important thing to keep in mind with the Altima is that it does use a continuously variable transmission, and some people dislike the way CVTs feel out on the road. To CVT or not to CVT is a very personal preference because you are going to have to live with the car out on the road long term, so you really want to make sure you're comfortable with that particular choice. Nissan's Altima also tends to be a little bit less reliable than the Camry, and that's really where the Camry excels. We have about the same kind of passenger room on the interior. I did find the Altima's front seats a little bit more comfortable, and the V6 version of the Altima is incredibly fast. It's actually a decent amount faster than the V6 version of the Camry. Hyundai's brand new Sonata starts at $21,150, and it is one of the few options in this midsize sedan segment that starts notably less than the Toyota Camry. The Sonata also has almost the same amount of feature content on the inside as the Camry, giving it a definite value proposition over this Toyota. Hyundai has also been very aggressive with their brand new Sonata, giving you a wider variety of engine options that also include an eco model as well as a hybrid model to compete with the model that we're taking a look at here. Of course, the hybrid model specifically with the Hyundai Sonata, I don't like quite as much as the Toyota Camry hybrid. That hybrid drivetrain is not quite as smooth, it's not quite as refined, and it also doesn't get the kind of fuel economy that we've been getting in this particular model. However, for the regular gasoline models, that Hyundai Sonata is a very good value over the Camry. Even though reliability hasn't been quite as high as the Toyota Camry in generalities, the Hyundai does have a much longer warranty than this vehicle. Passenger room right back here in the rear quarters is not quite as generous as it is in the Camry. However, the driving experience in that Sonata and the interior are very, very good. It's probably one of the freshest models in this segment. Most of the other entries in this segment fall somewhere in between what I've mentioned. I really don't have time to go over every mid-size sedan in America because there are quite a number. Volkswagen's Passat does very well compared to this, but it doesn't have the same kind of high-end options that you find in some of the competition. Chrysler's 200 is a little bit narrower than this. It's important to keep in mind, although you do have some high-end options that you can't get in the Camry. When you account for feature content, the vast majority of these mid-size sedans end up within a few $100s of one another. So personal preference is a big thing in this mid-size sedan category. A lot of mid-size sedans also tend to balance certain features. That's important to keep in mind. They balance styling with rear passenger accommodations. We also balance things like all-wheel drive with certain other features available. The important thing to keep in mind there is that those high-end features are not standard on the vast majority of models. The only real exception would be all-wheel drive, and if you're looking for all-wheel drive in this particular segment, Subaru's Legacy is really going to be the least expensive all-wheel drive vehicle in this segment. Of course, you do have to pay for that all-wheel drive system in essence because you will find a little bit less feature content in that base Subaru Legacy than you do in the Toyota Camry, again because you do have to pay for that all-wheel drive system. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Toyota Camry. If you want to know more about how the Camry stacks up to some of its competition, you can always drop me an email at alex@alexandautos.com. You can also find me over at facebook.com/alexandautos. You can also find me at Twitter as alexandautos, and I encourage you to click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. I'll see you next week.